So who's the real president of the United States? This is an open question because if there's one thing I think that people agree on, it's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is being led rather than leading himself. Someone else is calling the shots. But who is that? Not just who's directing Biden, but who is sort of running the country? Who holds the power? Who is the person in whose hands the critical future decisions of this country depend? I think to get the answer, we have to watch this short clip. Here we go. Listen. Yep, that's it. You know, his first name is Joe, but his last name is not Biden. It's Joe Manchin. By a kind of interesting quirk of history, this man, this Democrat from a Trump state, namely West Virginia, finds himself the true kind of power broker in America. And recently, Joe Manchin has written an article which is a kind of a warning to Democrats. This article appeared in the Washington Post, and it begins on a troubling note for the left in the title alone. It says, Joe Manchin, I will not vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. Boom. So here is Manchin saying, listen, there's been a lot of talk and lots of people on the left and in the media have been trying to push me to say that if I won't vote to abolish the filibuster, I'm going to sort of create enough holes in the filibuster that all kinds of things could kind of get past the filibuster. But the crushing aspect of Joe Manchin's op-ed is I'm not going to vote either to abolish it or to weaken it. In other words, the filibuster will stay pretty much as is. Now, this means, if you think about it, that the left's hope of overturning the filibuster, getting by the filibuster, sneaking past the filibuster, and thus paving the way to do a whole bunch of other things, has now been dealt a severe blow. Why? Because the Republicans are holding firm on this. There are no Republican votes to be had on this. The Democrats need all 50 of their own, plus Kamala Harris. And so even a single defection. Now, Kristen Sinema, the Democratic senator from Arizona, has also said she will not support getting rid of the filibuster, but Manchin's statement by itself kind of doesn't. And there goes Biden's hope for a meaningful or any significant gun control legislation. There goes the idea of passing H.R. 1 by getting around the filibuster. There goes the idea of doing a whole bunch, packing the court, goodbye, can't do it. Because once again, you need to get by the filibuster to do any of these things. But if that all were significant and bad enough from the left's point of view, Manchin goes further. He starts talking about, in the op-ed, this is in the text itself, the reconciliation process. And this is a kind of a budgetary tool that allows bills to be passed by a simple majority for things that are not directly tied to the budget. You can just go with a simple majority. You don't need more than that. And Manchin goes, I'm not okay with that either. I don't like this idea of Democrats ramming things through just because they've got 50 plus Kamala Harris. I might support some of these Biden measures on the merits, but that doesn't matter. I want the process to be bipartisan. I want Republican input. I want Republicans to weigh in on these things. I want compromise. In other words, I want what the Senate is meant to be, unlike the House, which has basically become hey, we've got the majority, and maybe a majority of only 5 or 6 seats, but here we go. We're more than you, so we're going to push this through. And Manchin is saying the Senate is supposed to be a more deliberative body. It was set up that way. It's supposed to work that way. I, for one, am going to do my part to make sure that it does work that way. Manchin says something interesting in an interview with CNN. He says, I've watched people who had power and abused it. I've watched people that sought power and destroyed themselves. And I've watched people that have a moment of time to make a difference and change things and used it. I would like to be the third. So you get here the sense that Manchin has a sense of his historic opportunity and his historic position. It so happens that the weighing scale is exactly in the middle, and he happens to be that middleman, which really means, and he's no dummy, he's figured it out, he's calling the shots. Now, interestingly, in his CNN interview, Manchin makes the point that January 6th changed him. And you might think that because of the insurrection, the riot, Manchin would actually be on the warpath for the Democrats. But no, he draws, in fact, this conclusion. He says to CNN, so something told me, wait a minute, pause, hit the pause button, something's wrong. And then the key sentence, you can't have this many people split to where they want to go to war with each other. What he's saying is that America is ultimately a society of friends, of people who agree at least on the basics, and they should find ways to work together. And this idea of treating your opposition as a domestic enemy, to treat a domestic opposition as if it were some kind of a foreign enemy, this is a recipe for taking the country towards civil strife. And Manchin, for one, does not want to be the guy who enables that to happen. Now, of course, the left is in a big uproar about this. Here's Julian Zelizer of CNN and with an op-ed, and it's full of the kind of rhetorical pomposities that I can assure you will mean nothing to Manchin. Manchin needs to understand that part of the responsibility of great leaders is to guide their constituents toward important goals and not just follow their existing preferences. Basically, the idea here is that Manchin is in a conservative state, but far from listening to his constituents, he needs to tell them where they ought to be going. First of all, I don't even think Manchin's decision is solely based on that. It seems to be based on statesmanship in the first place. The second thing that Julian Zelizer says is trying to win bipartisan support means putting forth legislation that would fail to meet the moment and provide Americans with what they need. Progressive mentality here in full display. In other words, we don't have to consult the elected leaders. Americans need certain things. Julian Zelizer knows what they are. And so he just wants the Senate to run roughshod over the opposition because, after all, this is what Americans need, and therefore we don't have to pay any attention to Republicans. And the tone of the op-ed is very clear in the way it concludes. The clock is ticking. Democrats need to solve their Manchin problem before it's too late. You can get a sense of the anxiety of the left here, and so they're pulling out all the stops. Their latest stop, by the way, is to bring in Jim Clymer. Jim Clymer is, the sort of the black guy. His idea is to basically go to Manchin and do the normal kind of racial intimidation. Hey, Manchin, I grew up in South Carolina. My great-great-grandfather suffered through this. My grandfather suffered through that. So basic message, we are going to start calling you a racist if you don't come on board with us. The left, this is how the left is. These are very wicked people who use this sort of attempt to strong arm guys like Manchin, who are very nice guys. And I'm going to talk tomorrow in a little more detail about the substance of Clymer's argument. It's essentially that the filibuster is racist because it was used in a racist way. No, the filibuster is not racist. And the fact that something is used in a racist way, it's kind of like saying, a car should be outlawed because this guy used his car to slam into another guy. Yeah, but that's not the fault of the car. That's the fault of the maniac behind the wheel. So the fact that something is used for something in a bad way doesn't make the something, in this case the filibuster, bad in itself, or bad in other uses that are completely different from that original use. Bottom line, Manchin, I think, is going to hold firm. Why? Because I think at the end of the day, he's thought about it. There's been a lot of pressure brought to bear from the left. Fortunately, his constituents are actually with him on this. Bipartisanship, it turns out, is not only the right thing to do, it is the politically expedient thing to do also.